I'm Mike.
I'm Sam. Let's get into it.
I had 0 pass interferences, 0 holdings. So cut the tape on again. I think you might see something else.
All right. So in today's episode, we have only one topic on the slate. We're gonna do our top 10 non-quarterback prospects for the NFL draft this year. It's a pretty exciting topic. I enjoyed. I'm sure Michael enjoyed compiling this list. I'm excited to see what you have in your top 10, and I'm excited to see what you think of my top 10. So, without further ado, we're going to start at number 10, and I'll go first, I suppose. So, for my number 10 non-quarterback prospect, I had Jeudy.
Okay.
I was honorable mention. I had Henry Ruggs. I was contemplating between Ruggs and Jeudy.
Yeah.
But I decided to put Jeudy. For his strengths, he's just an outstanding route runner.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's the best route runner out of all the wide receivers in the draft. His route running ability allows him to get open the majority of his time when he was running. He was extremely productive over his career at Alabama. That might be in part of because he had Tua thrown to him, but I think also his skills. He's great juking. When he catches the ball, it's kind of hard to tackle him. He doesn't necessarily break tackles, which is a flaw. He's not really going to break tackles because of he's more of a slender body type, but he has great juke and wiggle to be able to get around defenders and get small plays in the larger plays, which is also a huge plus because he has great yak or yards after catch.
Yeah, Sorry, were you finished right there?
My weaknesses for him.
Yeah.
His weaknesses, kind of has a lack of concentration. He drops balls easily. I think he gets ahead of himself, and he doesn't really attack the ball like someone, spoiler alert, who I have up higher on my list, Ceedee Lamb, who attacks the ball. He doesn't really go attack the ball, and he has trouble tracking deep balls from time. But I think that he'll be a great option. I don't necessarily think he can be a number one wide receiver on a team, but I think he'll be a great number two option for teams.
Yeah, I'm not going to expand on that too much because I also have him in my top 10. So when I get to him, I'll talk about him a little bit. But just turning on the tape of Jeudy, he's one of my favorite players to watch this year in college football and last year for that matter. Really talented player, really great player. And I do agree with your assessment. I think he's the second best wide receiver in this draft class, not the first, but we'll get into that a little bit more. So my number 10 prospect in the 2020 NFL draft that is not a quarterback is a player who I didn't see in any top 10s. I saw him kind of hovering around that 20th pick, but when I turn on the tape, this guy is so good. He's all over the field. He's a part of every single play, and that is linebacker out of LSU, Patrick Queen. I know actually other linebackers and other defensive players on that LSU team that are going into the draft are a little higher rated than Patrick Queen because of their measurables and things like that. Patrick Queen runs a 4.5 40, which is good for a linebacker, but it's nothing that absolutely stands out. He bench pressed 18 reps at the combine, nothing that absolutely stands out. Had a 35 vertical jump, nothing that absolutely stands out. But when you watch him on tape, he absolutely does stand out. He's great against the run. He's really good at blitzing the quarterback. He's good at interior and exterior pressure in terms of getting the quarterback. Some concerns with Patrick Queen. He was only a one-year starter. He was kind of a special teams player before his huge role on the championship LSU Tigers this year, even though towards the end of 2018, he was starting and he was playing a bigger role, and he played really good in their bowl game that year, actually. But I really like Patrick Queen. He's one of those guys where if you fall in love with the combine a little too much, he might fly under your radar, but I'm just a sole believer in who makes the most plays, who's just the best football player when I watch him with my eyes, and that really is Patrick Queen.
Yeah, I think with the lack of productivity, I think that doesn't part with Devin White.
Yeah.
The year before, and he was a first-round pick last year, but I think he is a great anchor for your defense, racking up tackles. He'll be all over the field, and I think that's a great choice. He is very underrated, and not a lot of people seem to appreciate him in their top 10s.
Yeah, Devin White had a really good year with the Buccaneers this year as a rookie. Another linebacker coming out of LSU. I think Devin White coming out of LSU was more productive and was a little bit better of a prospect, but I think Patrick Queen is similar in his versatility and his speed as this kind of middle linebacker hybrid. So I don't think you can go wrong with Patrick Queen.
So for my number 9, I had Tristan Works, tackle out of Iowa. So, I mean, looking at his combine stats, he had an insane combine performance. I mean, he ran a 40 at 4 seconds and 4.5 seconds.
Yeah.
Or 4.85 seconds, which is just insane for someone who's his weight. He's 320 pounds. That's just like a brick wall moving rapidly at you. When he's dropping back and cover or to block, he has great hand placement. He can use his hands really well to steer the rushing defense. Great speed, great upper body strength, but a lot of his weaknesses is with his legs and shoulders. Like when he's dropping back, when it's a pass play, it seems a little sloppy. And if he was gonna once he gets to the NFL, the sloppiness would allow more pressure on the quarterback because an all-pro end would easily be able to get around him with sloppy footwork and sloppy shoulders.
Yeah, Works is another guy I have actually a little bit higher on my list than you do. He played right tackle in college, which is a little bit less worth and valuable as the left tackle position. So, and due to his size, and I think another high profile tackle prospect that I'll get into later, I think with both of them, it wouldn't be bad to switch them to guard. We see a lot of prospects coming from college going into the NFL move from tackle to guard because that guard position is a little bit easier to play in the NFL. You usually have to face those defensive tackles rather than those really talented edge players. So we'll see what Wirfs ends up playing at the pro position, but I think he is a really good player. So I do have him a little bit higher up on my list. But at number 9, I'll have the guy that you had at number 10, and I'll have Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy, you touched upon his strengths. He's an incredible route runner. He is by far, in my opinion, the best route runner in this draft class, and he's one of the best route runners I've ever seen, period. He's not a guy where you can just throw up the ball to him and he'll win all these 50-50 catches. That's not really his play style. I think he needs to go to a specific NFL team with a really good route tree and a really complex playbook rather than somebody like Ceedee Lamb, who you touched upon, who we'll get into later a little bit, who I think he could be a plug and play with all 32 NFL teams. I think he's a guy who could win one-on-one coverages and a guy who you can throw the ball up to. But again, with Jerry Jeudy, I think he is a player who could benefit more so than a Ceedee Lamb with the system he's in and with the team he gets drafted to. So if he goes to a team like the Seahawks, for example, who only have a couple routes on the route tree, I don't think he's going to do that good there. But if he goes to another team like the Raiders, for example, with a John Gruden who is very imaginary in terms of what he does with his wide receivers, getting them open, I think he could be a really good player in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a lot of what coach grooms him up, and I think that's big in furthering his NFL development and career. All right, for number 8, I had another offensive lineman. I had tackle Mekhi Becton out of Louisville. So for someone who's 364 pounds, I think that's the biggest lineman on my list. He ran a 5.140, which is pretty impressive for someone who's that weight. Extremely powerful. He's pretty athletic. He has good feet for someone his size and speed. Weaknesses is, I feel like his body, he might need to drop a few pounds. I feel like that might be a little out of control at 364 pounds. I think sometimes he can get a little off balance when the rush is coming towards him, and he likes to keep battles close to him and not use his have his arms fully extended, which can lead to some concussions and other difficulties when defending the rush.
Yeah, he's a player. He just missed my top 10. He was a combine standout. I think his draft stock really improved with that combine. He did fail a drug test at the combine, but with the NFL gearing towards more lenient drug laws,
I mean,
I don't think that's going to be such a problem with him. What were you going to say there?
I think it was his first being flagged for any drug thing, so I don't think it's that big of a red flag. If it was someone if it was occurring, I think that would be a bigger issue, but I think it was just one time.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to touch upon it a little bit. I don't think it's going to be a big deal at all. I don't even think it's going to hurt his draft stock a little bit. But I think there were concerns, and you did touch upon it with his weight. With once it gets to the third quarter, fourth quarter, he starts to get a little bit sloppy, and his tape kind of suggests that he gets a little bit tired. So if you can just fix up that conditioning, that's honestly the easiest fix. That's not even coaching. That's just kind of self-motivation. And you're a pro now, and you have to be more well-conditioned. So that's not really an issue, but that is something that did stand up on the tape, and I'm glad you did mention that. So with my we're on number 8 now. So with my number 8 prospect, sorry for the pronunciation if I get it wrong, I have Javon Kinlaw out of South Carolina. He's a defensive tackle, and there's quite a few defensive tackle and defensive line prospects in this draft class. They're very highly rated, but Kinlaw really is a standout. He's a player where he really does remind me of Javon Kinlaw when you watch him on tape. Not more so the position and what their strengths are, but with the inconsistency, he's a player. He does play defensive tackle, and Javon Kinlaw's an edge. Javon Kinlaw's longer than Kinlaw is, but they both flash just great potential and the potential to be a game wrecker, get after the quarterback every play, penetrate the line of scrimmage, and get after the run every play. But there are a lot of inconsistencies on his tape for whatever reason. I think it's because of kind of sloppy mechanics a little bit. So if he goes to a team that really develops him, I think he could be a day one starter, and I think he could be a really good player in the NFL. But he does have those efficiency and consistency problems.
Yeah. I have him actually higher on my list, so I won't touch upon him that much. But I think that someone like him, he has a really high ceiling, and that's why I kind of put him up higher on my list.
Yeah, he does.
So for my number 7 prospect, non-quarterback prospect specifically, I had wide receiver out of Oklahoma, Ceedee Lamb.
Okay.
I think Lamb is not a lot better. I think he's better than Jeudy. His strengths are he can really jump. He has great hops. He attacks the ball when it's in air. Like he goes back towards the quarterback when the ball is coming to attack it. He can win those 50-50 balls. He's strong. He has great awareness on the field. And a lot of the throws towards him, he can make the adjustment like back shoulder. He can be able to make those adjustments midair. He has good speed, not the best speed. He's not a blazer. His route running is not as good as Jeudy, so there's a bit of a flaw. He has good wiggle, not as good as Jeudy, but his tackle breaking is pretty incredible. The first tackler won't make the tackle most of the time, which leads to him having great yards after catch. Some of his weaknesses, or like Jeudy, he's a slender build. So some people might be scared of he's not going to be strong or tough in the more physically demanding NFL. And I guess another weakness, which I talked about earlier, is his route running is not the best, but it's definitely good or better than average.
Yeah, I have Ceedee Lamb a little bit higher on my list than you do, so I'm not going to get into him too much. But in terms of his build, that is definitely a concern. I think he's going to get stronger as he gets into it and as the years progress, and he is an NFL pro, but I don't think that is such a concern with wide receivers. Now, it's great to have a really big, strong wide receiver like Larry Fitzgerald or Julio Jones, for example. Receivers like DeAndre Hopkins, for example, who have a slender build and still get it done and still break tackles and still seem strong in the NFL game. So I think it's just about that wiggle and that elusiveness with wide receivers, which I do think he has. But getting into my number 7 prospect, who is not a quarterback, I think you're going to disagree with this one. And I actually had him as my number 3 prospect going into this, but once I started to watch him a little bit more, started to highlight his weaknesses, kind of shied away from him being in my top 5. Now, he is still a top 10 prospect. I still do think he's going to be a very good football player, but I think he's a little bit overrated going into the NFL draft, and that is Jeff Okudah, the cornerback out of Ohio State. Now, he's having a lot of comparisons. I know people are comparing him to Patrick Peterson. I don't think he's as good as Patrick Peterson coming out of the draft. He is just a really, really hard worker. I know his mom died. That really motivates him. He has the ideal height, weight, length, and speed for a top-tier corner, which is great. He did run a 4.48, which isn't blazing fast, but you usually don't need your cornerbacks to be blazing fast. That's what you have your over-the-top help for most of the time. But a little bit, I'll touch upon his weaknesses a little bit. I think he doesn't do a great job with his eye discipline. He has somewhat of a unfluid kind of swing to him when he has to open up his hips when the receiver's running a vertical route. I think he kind of has slightly above average to average instincts when he's playing the zone, specifically the flat. I saw a lot of times when they're running curl concepts, he would kind of be late on the wide receiver. And another thing that I did see when watching his tape is he's not the best tackler in the world. I kind of got this perception with watching his highlights that he was a really good tackler, but I think he's just about an average tackler when it comes to college cornerbacks, which is a little bit of a red flag going into the NFL now. I think he will be okay in the long run in terms of tackling. Some of the best cornerbacks in the league aren't the best tacklers. Patrick Peterson's an example of that. He's not the best tackler in the world. And you don't really draft cornerbacks high to be this run stopper. You have them high to really be a great man-to-man cover guy, which he is. But I think if he goes to a team that plays heavy in zone or heavy in asking him to kind of play the flat, I think he is going to struggle a little bit. But I do really like Jeff Okudah overall. I know I just point out a lot of his negatives. I still think he's the best cover corner in this draft, and I still think he's a really good player.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where you're coming from, but I think with him, I think some of his strengths are a lot greater than his weaknesses.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think you're saying like his tackling, but I think he's also a great open field tackler.
Yeah.
When it's a one-on-one scenario, he'll make the tackle. So with my number 6 prospect, I had Javon Kinlaw, who you had a little bit higher on the list.
Yeah.
I think looking at him and Derrick Brown, who's another D tackle, I think they're pretty like. I think Derrick Brown is a little better, but I think like I can see someone having Kinlaw higher on his list.
Yeah.
I think Kinlaw is more filled out than Derrick Brown. Derrick Brown has a large midsection, which might be a concern to some, but I think at the tackle position, it's not that much of a concern. But Kinlaw, he has extremely long arms. He's very strong. He has great hands when battling. He has a powerful hook when he's trying to get around. Some of his weaknesses are he doesn't have many finesse moves or other types of technique. He kind of solely relies on his power. But I feel like once you get him in a roster with some veterans, they'll be able to teach him more finesse moves and more other types of ways to get around the offensive line, which would greatly benefit him.
Yeah, all good points on Kinlaw. And I think it is kind of seen that he kind of has a higher ceiling than Brown potentially, but he has a lower floor. So that's going to be interesting to see his position. I know a lot of NFL teams fall in love with potential, so I could see him falling in the draft, but I could see him being a surprise top 5, top 10 pick. So good points there. So for number 6, I had Tristan Works, which you talked about. He was the offensive tackle, specifically right tackle at Iowa. I kind of tried to rate the offensive tackles and just offensive linemen a little bit higher because I do think offensive line is one of the best in one of the most important areas of a football team, one of the most important units. Now, I think I could easily have him as my number 1 lineman prospect. I think he's neck and neck with Jedrick Wills, who I'll get into a little bit later. I had him a little bit higher on my list. But Tristan Works, he's an absolute animal in the weight room. I know one of the scouts' notes right here I'm reading is he can squat a bus. That's really important once you get into the NFL and you are a lineman. I think strength is very important. You saw guys like Quentin Nelson get drafted recently where they're an absolute animal in the weight room. I do think that does matter for offensive linemen. He has really good footwork, not a lot of flaws to his game at all. Some of his weaknesses is he has average explosiveness. Maybe he's not the best athlete in the world, but he still ran a 4.85 40, which is absolutely incredible. So I think Works is going to be a really good offensive tackle for whoever picks him.
Yeah, I think just like his hands and his strength really show how good he is. But I think he drops his shoulders down low, like he lunges forward a lot, and he kind of loses track of his hips sometimes. So that's why I had him lower on my list, just because it might not seem like a big deal in college football because he's not going to be playing as high as competition, but that might be something that might be more exposed once he gets to the NFL.
Yeah, you can't just be physically dominant as an offensive tackle when it comes to the NFL. You need to be so fundamentally sound with your footwork and your hand placement. So that's really important. That is why he's not my number one offensive lineman prospect. So that is something that he's going to have to work on. But I think as a prospect, he's really raw, but he's really, really good. So I think he's going to go top 10, and I think he's a really good player.
So for my number 5 non-quarterback prospect, I had offensive tackle out of Alabama, Jedrick Wills.
Mm-hmm.
So again, for someone who's over 300 pounds, he ran a 5.05 40, which is pretty impressive for someone his weight. He's relatively pretty athletic. He has a lot of fluid movement. He's a bulldozer, and he's an anchor on that offensive line. He protected Tua for their careers there at Alabama. He's very powerful and great balance with his feet, great base, and he has great leverage. His weaknesses are he might be a little undersized for his position. He's more of a shorter prospect. Sometimes his feet get a little too wide and he lunges forward. Like Tristan Works, he lunges forward with his shoulders, and Jedrick seems to be doing this similar thing. Another weakness is Tua's a lefty, so he was protecting a different side, so he might have to switch to the other tackle position. That might, I don't think it would be that big of a deal, but he might have some issues transitioning over there if he has to for the NFL.
That's a good point. Yeah, he's used to protecting a blind side for a quarterback, which is really important. But when you're switching from right tackle to left tackle, there are some minor footwork and handwork that you need to kind of transfer from the right side to the left side. So that's going to be interesting. I'll touch upon a little bit more where I see him playing in the NFL as I get up into my list a little bit. But for my number 5 prospect, it's a player you already talked about. It's one of the fan favorites and scout favorites coming into this entire draft, and it is Ceedee Lamb, a wide receiver out of Oklahoma. And trying to kind of differ from the points you made, because you already made really good points on him. He's a player where I think he goes anywhere and he makes his quarterback straight up look better. He reminds me of a DeAndre Hopkins, a Larry Fitzgerald, in that no matter who the quarterback is, he has such a wide catch radius and he's so good after the catch, and he's just such a safety blanket for his quarterback to the point where he's just such a can't miss prospect. He had Jalen Hurts throwing to him this past year, and Jalen Hurts, not the best quarterback in the world. He's probably not going to be going in the first 2 rounds. I could see him potentially going in the first 2 rounds, Jalen Hurts, because of his athleticism and because of his potential. But at Oklahoma, definitely wasn't the most accurate quarterback, didn't have the most zip on the ball. So a lot of times you saw Ceedee Lamb having to wait for the ball, having to come back for the ball. So his route running and his ability to get open was kind of hindered by Jalen Hurts and by the fact that the ball did come a little second too late. But for Ceedee Lamb, that did not matter at all. His game is going to completely translate to the NFL world, and I think he's going to have a better quarterback in the NFL, hopefully, than Jalen Hurts is. So he's going to be even better than he was on the collegiate level, which I think is hard to believe, but I think it's possible.
Yeah, he's just a straight baller, and he'll make anyone thrown to him look better than they actually are. So for my number 4, someone you had a little farther back, I had Jeff Okudah out of The Ohio State University. So for his strengths, I saw that he's very confident. He's a very motivated individual. He has a great height and weight for someone playing cornerback. He has long arms, which is good for disrupting the pass. What I said earlier, he's great in the open field tackle in a one-on-one scenario. He's good at winning those 50-50 balls and knocking it down before the wide receiver is able to catch it. He doesn't get sloppy. He doesn't really get called for penalties. He's a little bit slower than some of the other cornerback prospects like A.J. Terrell and C.J. Anderson from Florida, but yeah. I think he makes up for that with some of his other ability. Like you said earlier, his instincts are less than stellar, and when he gets blocked, he struggles to get off a block by a wide receiver from time to time. But I think that someone who's very confident and motivated, they're eager to better their game and get better with the NFL, and I think he'll take tips and tricks to get better and lock down cornerbacks.
Yeah, I saw another NFL comp for him was Denzel Ward, and he does remind me of Denzel Ward a lot. Where that did give me a little concern with the comp is Denzel Ward has been a good cornerback on the Browns so far, but he's kind of a flashy Marcus Peters type where he'll get really good stats, but he'll kind of blow coverage once in a while. You've seen Denzel Ward get beat a little bit, be a little bit too small against the bigger guys, be a little bit too less shifty and quick against some of the smaller guys. So I do see that as a potential problem for Jeff Okudah, but with Denzel Ward and Jeff Okudah, I think their potential is off the charts. I think they could come into the NFL right away and be a really solid 2 cornerback. They're not your ideal number 1 right away, but I think they can develop into that number 1.
Yeah.
So for my number 4 prospect, it's somebody you already touched upon. And I think rounding out into the top 3, I think we have the same top 3 by the looks of it. But so for my number 4 prospect, I'm going to have Jedrick Wills, who is that offensive tackle out of Alabama, protected Tua's right side. And the thing with Alabama, they had a really, really good offensive line. So it's hard to have one offensive lineman stand out above the rest, but Jedrick Wills did do that. I think he only allowed 5 sacks in the last 3 years, which is absolutely incredible. He's a player. He's a little bit undersized as a tackle. So, and I know a lot of mock drafts have him going to a team like the Cardinals. So I think with his position, it depends where he goes. But if he does go to a team like the Cardinals who do need a center, I know that picking top 10, it's a little bit too early to pick a center, but you saw teams do it in the past with, I believe the Colts picked Ryan Kelly pretty high. I know Travis Frederick, he didn't go top 10, but he went in the first round. So that center position is still really important, and highlighting some of his strengths and why I think he would be a really good center potentially in the pros is that he's very quick to the point of attack, and he's a really eager run blocker, which does cause him to kind of lean forward a little bit too much. But I think he has a lot of really good pull potential in terms of being a center and having to pull left or pull right on run blocks. So I think he's a really interesting prospect, and I think a position change is pretty likely for Jedrick Wills at the next level.
Yeah, I think looking at this year's center draft class, it's pretty weak. So, I mean, making a decision like that would turn out for the better.
Yeah, obviously we haven't seen him snap the ball yet.
Yeah.
A center, that's the most important part of a center. They need to be able to snap the ball up so quickly. They need to be that quarterback of the offensive line. So he didn't show that he could do that at the college level. He was that leader of that Alabama offensive line, but we'll see how that translates to the next level.
Yeah, definitely. So going into the top 3, I think safe to say that we're pretty similar top threes.
Yeah.
I think the number 1 is pretty cemented, but 2 and 3 can fluctuate a little bit.
Yeah.
For my third prospect, non-quarterback prospect, I had Derrick Brown out of Auburn.
Okay.
So he's a massive body, 326 pounds. His midsection is ginormous. It's like the moon on his stomach, or his stomach. He ran a 5.6 or 5.16, which is pretty good for someone his size. He's extremely strong and athletic. He has a combination of everything: the power, speed, finesse. So he's not going to need to go to the NFL and learn how to develop one of those skills because he already has it. He can play straight up, like right over the center, or he can play inside gaps between the center and the guards. I don't see there's much of a weakness there besides maybe he's a little too heavy, but I think maybe his leg strength, carrying like that big of a load and having to fight against offensive linemen, it might give out later in this season, but I don't think that's cause for much concern. I think he's a pretty polished prospect.
Yeah, so we're going to have the same exact top 3 here, actually. I have Derrick Brown as my number 3 prospect, who is that defensive tackle out of Auburn. You hit upon it. But the thing with defensive tackles that makes Derrick Brown so rare is his position versatility at that defensive tackle position. And it's so rare that you find a 3-down defensive tackle. Usually defensive tackles are either really good run stoppers or really good guys who can go after the quarterback, and usually you don't have guys that are both, and that's so rare in the NFL. You see guys like Aaron Donald that could do that. So Derrick Brown, that's what makes him so valuable, and his potential to be so high is because he's a physical freak, yes, and he's very strong, 28 bench press in the combine, but he is so good at penetrating early blockers and getting to the backfield very quickly and getting the quarterback. So he's a really good pick. He's probably a top 5 pick because that hybrid defensive tackle is so rare. But a little bit of caution. I think one of the hardest positions to translate from the NFL or from college football to NFL is that defensive tackle because of the physicality that is in the trenches and down-to-down football in the NFL. So just because of the position he plays, maybe it's a little bit of a red flag. We saw Quinnen Williams, who was arguably the best prospect in the draft last year. People fell in love with him out of Alabama. He had a really hard time with the Jets this past season. So maybe it'll be a bit of a slow transition for Derrick Brown, but I think he's a really good prospect.
Yeah, I think just looking at him, I'm like very excited to see what he brings to the NFL. I think he has an extremely high ceiling, and I think if he gets on the right staff, most players, if they get on with the right coaching staff, they'll succeed.
Yeah.
So for my number 2 prospect, I had out of Clemson, I had Isaiah Simmons. I mean, the biggest strength is the guy can play any position on the defensive side of the ball. He can play safety. He can play linebacker. He has a great combination of speed and strength. He's just all over the field, making tackles everywhere. He's great in coverage. He's great in tackling. Sometimes when you need him to rush, like be an edge rusher, he could get held up by the offensive lineman just because he's not used to being a sole rusher, because he's a little bit undersized, but not that much. I think a weakness is to him if he's not on the right team with the right coaching staff and they don't put him in the right position that might hurt him. I think a team that really knows, like a team that has a really well-trusted defensive coordinator and position coaches would know which one he would best play at. But I think if you get him, he's a home run.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. He's my number 2 prospect as well. And I think he is that Jerry Jeudy prospect where they have so much talent, but him more so than other guys, it's very important for him to get picked by the right team, because I think a lot of defensive coordinators are very, very simple in terms of their schematics. They just kind of play straight up, and they don't have a lot of imagination, in terms of their defensive players. But I think Isaiah Simmons, if a defensive coordinator turns on his tape and falls in love like I did, he's my favorite defensive player in this draft, just purely tape-wise. He's so fun to watch. He's all over the field. He plays safety. He plays free safety, strong safety, outside linebacker, inside linebacker, edge rusher. He plays all positions on the football field. He's so versatile like that, and that is so valuable in the NFL. But I do think if he gets picked by a team who is just going to say, oh, Isaiah Simmons, you're our outside linebacker, and that's all you'll play. Or, oh, Isaiah Simmons, you're our middle linebacker, and that's all you'll play. I think he does have slight weaknesses at every position to the point where I think he does need to play that hybrid role where he needs to move around. He can't be a middle linebacker on a run scenario every single down because he is more of that hybrid. He's not going to be that Luke Kuechly, get in the trenches and have his head down and hit you every single play. He's really good in the pass coverage game as well. So him playing that kind of Derwin James closer to the line of scrimmage compared to most safeties, kind of hybrid type position, I think that's where he'll be at best. But I'm so excited to watch Isaiah Simmons in the NFL. He's my favorite defensive prospect, and he's going to be really good in the NFL.
Yeah, he's another player I've seen live. I saw him this year against Florida State. He was just all over the field, really fun to watch, and just, I think having that connection with him when I saw him live makes me want him to succeed more because it was just really fun to watch.
Yeah.
So for number one, easily, I think he's in a class of his own. I don't think anybody can touch him really.
Yeah, I agree.
Number one non-quarterback prospect is Chase Young
Mm-hmm.
of Ohio State University. He's extremely strong. He has finesse moves. He can get around the quarterback. He's relentless in his rush. I mean, if I was the opposing quarterback, I would be terrified if Chase Young was lining up against me. I think he's just that good.
Yeah.
I mean, Chris Simmons talked about how he's strong enough to be able to, like, if you need him to play D tackle for a couple snaps or a game, he can do that because he's just that strong of an individual. Some of his weaknesses, I don't think there's much of a weakness to his game. He was a non-factor in, like, the Clemson game and the Wisconsin conference championship game, but that was just because he was getting double-teamed and triple-teamed. Still in those games, he was being double-teamed and triple-teamed, but he was still being disruptive. Like in the Clemson game, he only had 2 tackles, but he was still applying pressure to Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
And maybe he's not as refined as someone like Joey or Nick Bosa coming out, which might be, I mean, that's not really a flaw because Joey Bosa is just he's a great player. So I think that's, if you're below him, still good.
Yeah. It's pretty hard with Chase Young. We see he's getting compared to all these great perennial all-pro NFL players, which is a little bit unfair to him. So he kind of seems not as good in comparison. I'm not absolutely head over heels with Chase Young as other people are. A lot of scouts are saying he's the best edge prospect they've graded in a very, very long time. I do think Chase Young is the consensus number 2 pick. I think he is easily a top 2 prospect in this draft class. I think he's easily the number 1 non-quarterback prospect in this draft class. I do have a bit of a bias with you said, with that Clemson game and with that Wisconsin game, he was a bit of a non-factor. You had a lot of good counter arguments to that notion that he was kind of a non-factor, but that is a bit of a red flag for me now. In the NFL right away, he's not going to be getting double and triple teamed, and any player in the NFL, if they get double or triple teamed, they're not going to do much. It's up to their teammates on the defensive line to pick up their slack. And it really is a strength for your team if you are double and triple team, because that leaves single teams across the board for all your other teammates. Not only that, but if you blitz, then there could be a man that is not accounted for. So that is really good that he does draw double teams at the college level. So that's very good. If he gets double teamed in the NFL, I'm sure he still would struggle. Like we saw Nick Bosa struggle this year, for example, against the Ravens when he played Ronnie Stanley in that really big offensive line. They double teamed him, and he was an absolute non-factor in that game. But that's when you just have to say it's up to the other guys on the line to get that pressure. So I don't think that's too big of a concern with Chase Young. Chase Young, his measurables are outstanding. 6'5", just an absolute physical freak. He led the nation with 16.5 sacks this year. He had the most sacks per game as well, with a little over 1.5, I believe. He was a unanimous All-American. He was a Heisman finalist, which is
top 4 for Heisman, which is just incredible for a defensive player.
Incredible. Anytime I see a defensive player top 5 for Heisman, you got to raise your eyebrows and be like, wow, that's an incredible player. Now, I know this was the biggest sweep in Heisman finals history, I believe, with Joe Burrow winning it almost unanimously, but he still ended up winning 6 individual awards. Those guys who watch college football and giving out the awards, they know these prospects best. Chase Young, great player. Really excited to see him play in the NFL. Kind of sucks that he's going to play for the Redskins, but still, nonetheless, I'm excited to watch him play.
Yeah, I'm extremely excited because I have a connection with him. Seeing him play all season, it was just really fun to watch. I mean, the Ohio State team, he was just a leader on that defense, and you can tell he was that leader. Well, there's our top 10. So you want to roll through your top 10 without a description, and I'll do the same for mine.
Yeah, sure. So my top 10, number 1, I have Chase Young. Number 2, I have Isaiah Simmons. Number 3, I have Derrick Brooks. Number 4, I have Jedrick Wills. Number 5, I have Ceedee Lamb. Number 6, I have Tristan Works. Number 7, I have Jeff Okudah. Number 8, I have Javon Kinlaw. Number 9, I have Judy. And number 10, I have Patrick Queen.
Yep, good list. Number 1, I had Chase Young. 2, Isaiah Simmons. 3, Derrick Brown. 4, Jeff Okudah. 5, Jedrick Wills. 6, Javon Kinlaw. 7, Ceedee Lamb. 8, Mekhi Becton. 9, Tristan Works. And 10, Judy. So there you have it. Hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you in the next video.